Right, so welcome to those of you who are here. Um, my name is Pauline Lake. I'm the Curriculum and PD Coordinator for the National Center for Computer Science Education. And our webinar for October is on CS support beyond the classroom. And we'll be sharing tonight some external resources that you might be interested in using in your classroom, as well as thinking about how you can get more community involvement going. So as a reminder, we are recording this webinar and it will be posted to our YouTube channel for viewing later. I've also enabled the live transcription, so feel free at the bottom of your Zoom window to turn that on. You're welcome throughout the night. We will have some time for Q&A, but you're welcome to use the raise a hand feature as well. Or you can use the chat throughout the night. We have some guest speakers that we will be having join us, and we can make sure that they answer any questions that you have. Again, my name is Pauline Lake. I'm the Curriculum and PD Coordinator for the National Center for Computer Science Education. We'll be joined by several guest speakers tonight. We will have a presentation momentarily by the Computer History Museum. They are fortunate to share some materials with us, and I want to make sure that those get shared with everyone. We also have a guest speaker from the MADE, the Museum of Arts and Digital Entertainment. So Shem, I think Shem is here. Would you like to introduce yourself? Say hello if you're here.
Hello, I'm Shem. I am the new Executive Director of the Museum of Arts and Digital Entertainment and was previously a volunteer educator / instructor there.
Awesome. Super excited to have you here tonight, Shem, and sharing the resources with our teachers. So that will be a little bit later. We'll also have Dr. Barbara Erickson with us with Sisters Rise Up. She's also one of the curriculum developers for the CS Awesome curriculum, if we're using that. I don't believe Barb is here with us yet, but she will be with us. And we also have a speaker a little bit later on to talk about Microsoft Teals, if you've ever heard of the Microsoft Teals program. If not, stick around. We're going to share more information about that as well. So we'd love to hear who is here. So feel free in the chat to introduce yourself. Tell us your name, where you're from, where you teach at. I do recognize at least one name in the participants list tonight, which is super exciting, but feel free to introduce yourself in the chat so we can get to know who's here in the audience that we're working with tonight. Welcome, Brenda. Happy to have you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone.
Hi, Anna. Welcome, welcome. Right, so again, feel free to introduce stuff in the chat. Feel free to ask questions as we go through the night as well. So what do you have to look forward to tonight? We just finished a little bit of our welcome and introductions. I'm going to give a little brief introduction into why we are doing this particular topic tonight. As I mentioned, we'll have a presentation from the Computer History Museum, a presentation from the MADE, then Sisters Rise Up, and then more information about additional resources to wrap us up tonight, including Microsoft Teals. So we have a jam-packed night. Should be good. So when we were thinking about the topic for tonight's webinar, we were thinking about hearing from our teachers who maybe have been telling us at this time of the year they're thinking about how do they grow their CS classroom? How do they start recruiting for next year, even thinking about having students sign up and wanting to maybe expand who is represented in their classroom. And often we tell our teachers, well, there are lots of resources out there, there's lots of support you can get. And so we wanted to share some of those resources. But we also hear teachers, now that the year is getting started and you are kind of in the swing of things, thinking about how do I keep my students engaged now that they're in my classroom, and wanting to learn more about CS. And we also typically will hear teachers asking for resources to that regard and saying, what else can I do with my students beyond just the curriculum that I might be using, saying mobile CSP or CS Awesome? What additional things can I be doing? But then there's also this teacher that we often hear this phrase saying that you are an island. And I don't know if that's true for anyone who's here tonight with us, but thinking about, are you the only computer science teacher at your school and you feel that you kind of are alone in your efforts to bring computer science to the students in your school? And so this idea of being able to think about computer science outside of the classroom or beyond the classroom, whether that means being able to let students see how computer science is applied outside of the classroom or bringing resources into the classroom to help you and support you with the computer science learning opportunities that you're doing with your students. It could be either, right? So when we're thinking about CS support beyond the classroom, some things that might come to mind, you might think about, how can I do field trips? I know that that sounds like it was years ago now with the pandemic when we were actually doing in-person field trips, and it's actually been pretty nice to see the adaptations that have come up. Lots of virtual field trips that have come up and that are available for you to use with your students. But thinking about a teacher who maybe is not only an island, but also maybe inexperienced with computer science. Maybe it's your first or second year sharing this computer science curricula with your students, and you're not quite sure. You're not feeling like you're the expert because you're not. And how can you tap into resources like outside volunteers who can help you with supporting your students and their needs and their interests? So those are just a couple of the ideas, and we're actually going to hear from a couple of possible virtual field trip ideas or resources that you can tap into, learn about programs that you can tap into that might have access to volunteers and other resources that you can connect with and connect your students with as they're learning CS. I'd love to know if there are others that you might think of, right? When you think of beyond the classroom and support, are there other things? So feel free to unmute or put those into the chat if you think that there are other types of things that would fall into this category. I'll just trying to use my appropriate wait time there. If you do have other ideas, feel free to share. If you have a resource or a story you'd like to share, feel free to do that. I do see some ideas coming into the chat now. Brenda says former students. So I'm assuming that means bringing former students in who have been in your CS classroom before and having them speak with your students. And also parents. Oh, that is a good one. So parents and thinking about community, as in like family community too, is very important, right? Allowing parents to come in and see what's going on, or finding ways to give students assignments that they can bring home and share with their families is super important. So both great ideas, Brenda, both great ideas. Again, if you have other thoughts, other things that you like to do with your students, feel free to share that with us. So we are going to hear first from the Computer History Museum, and they have been super generous to be able to share with us a recording because the representative could not be here live tonight. And what I wanted to do is just to share first a little bit about the Computer History Museum if you have never heard of them. So in its founding was in 1979, and they are a leading museum exploring computing past, digital present, and future impact of technology and humanity. And they are in the heart of Silicon Valley in California. And they are hoping to be able to share computing artifacts and the history of computing and computers and how they have been inspiring people to make and build a better world. So we are going to just share this video with you all. You are welcome to check out their website, and I can put this for your reference into the chat. It's computerhistory.org. You're welcome to check that out. I am just going to make sure that I'm sharing my sound. And if you can't hear it once I start playing it, just let me know.
So the first gallery that we're going to look at in Revolution is about the abacus. And Revolution is actually one of 17 galleries. Don't worry, we're not going to stop in every one. Each one devoted to a certain theme or topic in computing, like punch cards or calculators or supercomputers or analog computers. Those are all galleries that feature just that technology and objects related to it. Every artifact, every gallery, I should say, also has a video station at which people can stand and watch and hear the inventors speak. So the narrative of the museum, of course, is the museum's narrative. We write the labels and so on. But if you want to hear the inventor's voice, and in many cases we have long lost footage of rare footage of inventors speaking about their inventions available right in front of the very objects, so people can get a multimedia experience there. So the abacus is the first gallery that people see. It's actually called Calculators, and the abacus is, of course, one of the pretty much the first thing people see when they walk in. And we show that this is an ancient device. It's really of a class known as a counting frame, and it goes back even as far back to, so there were Sumerian abaci in 2500 BC, as well as abaci in Egypt and Persia and all over the Near and Middle East, and as well as Asia. So if we take a little turn to the left here, so if you can see just off to the left, whoops, sorry. These are aids to calculation. And here we show with the ever-present gaze of famous mathematicians through history, like Pascal and Leibniz and so forth, and Babbage. Just their eyes, though, to kind of give it a little design element. Here you see slide rules, linear and circular, an interactive slide rule right in the middle there that people can actually practice and understand how a slide rule works on their own. Very, it's kind of an indestructible museum one. And as well, we have some beautiful brass and glass gunner's rules, sectors, compasses from the 17th and even the 16th century that people can see in the drawers underneath those. So really going as far back as we can. This exhibit is meant to show, remember, the first 2,000 years of computing. So we're going back as far as we can. Off to the right, you can see it as a Curta, the famous round cylindrical mechanical calculator designed by Kurt Herzog, a Holocaust survivor. There's a Pascaline there, and Napier's Bones, an interactive off to the side, the far right there, where you can learn how to use Napier's Bones. Now here's a favorite, I think, of Paul's. He really liked this one, the Antikythera mechanism. And I don't know how many people have heard of this, but it's actually rewriting the entire history of technology because this device, which is from basically the 2nd century, demonstrates or within it shows technology that should not have been, that was not discovered until the 1500s in Europe, or perhaps a bit earlier. So the Antikythera mechanism is actually an eclipse prediction machine that uses a series of geared wheels that interrelate and follow ancient Babylonian star cycles in order to allow the user to predict the motions of the planets and when there'll be eclipses. So you think about the time when this was made, AD, 2nd century AD. It was made in the tradition of Archimedes, actually. And so the weird thing is, it's quite alien in its state of technological advancement. As I said before, we didn't see clocks or other mechanisms of this level of sophistication for another 1500 years. So it really stands out as an oddity. I should point out that this was discovered initially in 1900 by Greek sponge divers who went to a little island called Antikythera. There's an island called Kythera and another one called Antikythera. And as they were sponge diving there, the diver came back up gasping for breath and said there were all sorts of dead people on the bottom and dead horses, and he was very afraid. And initially people thought he had the nitrogen bends and he wasn't, in a proper frame of mind. Then went back down and saw basically one of the most important finds of classical statuary in history. Something like 40% of all existing classical Roman statuary comes from this one site, the Antikythera site. 36 marble statues of people like Julius Caesar and Julius Caesar, and also the other thing I wanted to point out is you can see this little station here in the middle. This is that video station that I was talking about, where you can actually see and hear people talking about the mechanism. And we actually had a custom movie made for us by the journal Nature, which describes the mechanism, how it works, and cites world authorities on the mechanism and its history. It's still being decoded, is sort of the honest truth. You can see the original in the Archaeological Museum in Athens. And I think there are about 80 parts, and some of them are falling off. But this is probably why we say the first 2,000 years of computer history, even though the abacus, the Sumerian abacus, is older. We really had the Antikythera device in mind when we thought of the first 2,000 years. Okay, punch cards. Punch cards, of course, were the mainstay of electronic digital computing throughout the 20th century. And it began with this modest machine known as the 1890 census machine. This is a replica, by the way, I should be right up front about that. Wooden replica built by the master craftsman Roberto Gotelli, who was actually built a lot of the models of Leonardo da Vinci for various world fairs and museums in the 60s and 70s. So he built this for us. And you can see essentially how it works. You put the census taker goes out in the field and asks questions. It's then brought to a clerk who, if you look at the device on the left here, this is called a pantograph. The clerk then encodes the answers from the census taker as a series of holes in using the pantograph. At that stage, the data is now machine readable. So that's a rather cosmic transition in the history of information processing, to move from manual to machine readable computing. So the Hollerith machine was made to, you basically put the punch card in this little press here, close the press, and inside, mapping every possible hole position of the punch card are discrete cups of mercury, as in the element mercury, the liquid metal mercury. On top of the little waffle iron press there are little rods that are connected to one side of a circuit. The cups of mercury are connected to the other side of a circuit. Where there's a hole, the rod goes through, contacts the cup of mercury, and kicks over the corresponding counter, which you see on the face of this machine, one position. So it's a tabulator. So at the end of the day, you just read your dials and you've got the sum totals of all your statistics. They were able to do the census in about three years using this technology. And the previous census, the 1880 census, had just been finished with months to spare. So they really needed to automate. And Herman Hollerith, a German-American engineer and census contractor, came up with this system. Hollerith's patents, of course, became the basis for the IBM company, which started out as the Computing, Tabulating, and Recording Company in 1911, and then changed its name in 1924 to the International Business Machines Corporation. So all of IBM's initial patents, sorry, not all, but most of IBM's early important patents were Hollerith patents. In fact, as you may know, these punch cards were sometimes called Hollerith cards for that reason. Hollerith apparently got the idea from a couple of sources, watching a train conductor punch out tickets, which had a physical description of the people occupying the seat. So if the little punched out ticket that the conductors had punched said there should be an elderly woman here and there's a young boy, there's something amiss, someone's moving around the train or whatever. The other source is the Jacquard loom, of course, which used the Jacquard loom add-on, which was added on to existing looms to provide a punch card driven pattern generation mechanism. And anyway, that's a long discursion on punch cards. One more on punch cards, which I want to bring up, is the Power Samus machine. And I brought this out especially because this is an English audience, or a Welsh audience as well. And I wanted to point out that this was a special project actually done by the Botanical Society of the British Isles to map all the flora of the British Isles. And so using citizen scientists in the best amateur tradition who would go out and fill out surveys of local flora, they encoded these in punch cards and then generated these maps. And you can buy the book on Amazon, the actual atlas as well. And that was all done in this particular one in the 60s, using equipment very similar to this. And the Power Samas cards, of course, these ones are only 40 columns, but Power Samas made cards in multiple formats, up to even 130 columns. A little nerd moment, if you're interested, the Power Samas machines use mechanical feelers, while the IBM's systems read their cards using electronic systems. Like I say, that's of only interest to the most diehard gearheads. Okay, Enigma. I'm not going to speak much about Enigma because the people on this call are probably so much more better acquainted with the machine. But what I did want to do, draw your attention to, was just to the left of Enigma, you see a pulley wheel. This pulley wheel, which came from an English chap named Toby Harper, is said to be one of the few, or maybe the only remaining piece of a Colossus. And it's from the bedstand. If you see right beside here on the wall, we've blown up a picture of the bedstand that was used, that ran the tape at, I think it was 5,000 characters per second, something like that. Some incredible number of miles per hour while it was looking for matches. Just a final call, please visit us. I would love to personally show any BCS members, give you a personal tour and show you around the museum. And we can stop and have a coffee or a tea and talk about computer history. There's so much more, and we've just taken a really whirlwind guide through the place, and I hope you enjoyed it, and I look forward to your questions.
Awesome. So thank you to the Computer History Museum for providing that. If you are interested, I don't think we have anyone from California with us tonight, but this little virtual tour will be available, and it's something that you could use with your students who might be interested in learning a little bit more about the history of computers. And the Computer History Museum also has some materials available. And so if you're interested and would like access to those materials, you can feel free to send us an email at csed@css.edu and reach out, and we can make sure that those materials are shared with you so that way you can use them. Right? Awesome. Okay, so up next we have The Maid. So The Maid is in Oakland, California, and they have a mission to elevate digital entertainment. So students may be interested in video games and digital entertainment, and you may be hooking them with that to engage them in your class. But thinking about that as being an art form and looking at how video games are created and trying to inspire the next generation of game developers. So Shem is going to give us an introduction to The Maid and some resources that they have available for you all. Shem, I will stop screen sharing so that way you can share.
Sounds good. All right, let me start sharing. All right, everybody see my presentation? Let me see. All right. Let me just, some reason I can't see my cursor when all right, that will have to do. All right, so my name is Shem, as I've said before. I am with the Museum of Art and Digital Entertainment, also known more affectionately by everyone around Oakland as The Maid. And I'm here to talk about how we believe that computer science education can be contextualized in a way that makes a lot more sense to all students through digital entertainment and video games in particular. So the Maid is a museum, as I said, in Oakland, California. But prior to COVID, we actually had a physical location. And in this physical location, people from all over Oakland could come for a reasonable price and play video games. But not only that, there would be co-working space for local indie game developers. There would be events like Smash tournaments. There would be speakers who would come in from the video game industry, kind of talking about how they digitized the first music or how they digitized the first art assets. So there was a lot that happened within the walls of the museum before we closed down due to COVID. As stated before, our mission is to elevate digital entertainment as an art form, and digital entertainment requires a very high level of skill, both in technical skill as well as creative skill. But currently it isn't seen by a lot of people as an art form. It's kind of seen as pop culture or kind of a lesser form of art. And we hope to change that, because we really do think that it is a powerful art form, and it's one of the best ways that the coming generations will be able to express themselves. To that end, one really important thing that we do is we offer classes, or we offered classes in the spot, and we're planning on opening them up again. One thing that we don't do, though, is we don't teach computer science directly, because we believe that there's a lot of institutions that do a very good job about that. Sorry, it's this thing is getting in the way. However, what we do try to do is digital entertainment is comprised of a lot of these disparate disciplines, and they're all kind of tied together through computer science principles like algorithms and data structures. And so personally, my background is in film and video games. And so I see the kind of work that happens between artists and developers, and how there has to be a lot of this conversation that happens back and forth in order to make a really good product. The employees of the future are going to really need to be able to learn how to solve, how to determine how their skills can be translated towards solving technical problems. But at the same time, really technical employees will have to be able to know how to take a lot of this feedback and use it to create usable systems and something that's actually useful to people who are not developers. So what I'm ultimately talking about is this vocabulary for interdisciplinary communication. There has to be this base technical understanding that both the non-technical folks who are bringing their skills, their creative skills to the equation, as well as the developers, they both need to have enough common overlap that they can communicate with each other and work effectively. So this is how we got started. This is Mike Pavone, one of our first educators. He's prepping for a Scratch class right now. So the way that these Scratch classes would work, the first 30 minutes, Mike would go over and he would walk them through making a video game. And then the next 30 minutes, the students would be able to make it their own, however they wanted. And Mike would come around and ask them, well, how do you want to make it fun? Like, what's fun to you? And so the first step may consist of the technical aspects, but the second half would consist of a very creative, fun aspect. And this is the part of the education department that I got started on about 5 years after the first classes. Vita Rogers and Nanette Rosen, they worked on the more kind of creative side of this and kind of speaking about bringing this out of the classroom. They took a bunch of students from the public schools districts and they brought them to Facebook. And this is the first time a lot of these students had the chance to go onto a technology campus despite living in the Bay Area. And so they had the chance to be on a technology campus, learn how to express themselves through robotics in this case. Other classes that we taught down there were Scratch and some creative classes as well. So here's kind of the numbers based off of the approaches that we took in both of those different pathways. We taught over 1,500 students over 10 years. And while we taught to a variety of students over in Oakland, most of them were low-income students of color. All of the classes were free. We didn't turn away students. And in fact, we actually allowed students free access to the video game exhibits after the classroom. So they could really contextualize what they were learning in class and see where it could lead them in the future. Topics that we taught included Scratch, as I've said, Python, C++, audio design, pixel art, animation, robotics, and writing for games. The people who came to teach these classes, they were volunteers with real world experience. So we had software engineers from Apple, from Lucasfilm, from Kixeye, and a variety of other startups to really kind of help these students see how they could take their own individual skills into the workforce. Now this was great, but COVID-19 came along and we ended up actually having to close down a lot of our classes. So this led us to a reassessment of how we continue this mission. And through that reassessment, we had to go back to this guiding principle of our classes. It's that we don't teach computer science, but we teach how to make digital experiences and how to think critically about them. And the best way that we could determine how to do this was to talk to people who had to go through the process of thinking critically about video game development. These are the people who made video games, the people who were in the work of preserving it, the creatives who brought their skills to the equation as well. Some examples of the people that we've had on our podcast. Chris Melisinos, who works with the Smithsonian, talked about games as art and exhibit design. He works on the video game collection over there. There's Vani Bogovic, who comes from a more arts and theater background, and she talks about voice acting and sound design. And then there's Andre Lamoth, who comes from a background of hardware engineering. And he talks about how engineering education can be made a lot more approachable to younger audiences. Another thing that we started doing is in preparation for reopening the museum, we started hosting outdoor exhibits. And this is definitely, a lot of times people will go like, oh, they're just playing video games. But video games, when you're playing them around other people, you realize that it's an incredibly diverse art form. It's very new. There's people all around the world who are expressing themselves through video games. And even through the act of playing video games, the experiences we create can be very diverse, and they are completely our own experiences and the experiences that we share with others. So this kind of brings me to the takeaways that I want to talk about, what we've learned over those years of teaching and years of trying to figure out a way to contextualize computer science, and more importantly, individual skills that students may bring to digital entertainment. So one way that teachers can contextualize computer science education is to approach the creation of games as an art form. And when we talk about approaching games as an art form, we talk about critique. Like we a lot of times in literature, we'll ask about what are the literary elements, what are the literary devices that the author uses. Well, you can take the same approach with game design. We can ask what makes a game mechanic fun? What were the techniques that the game developer used or the artist used? One example would be Mario. In particular, the mechanic of jumping. On the surface, it seems very simple. You press a button, Mario goes up, Mario goes down. But when you think a little bit deeper about it, you see that there's an artistic component. There's an illustration that appears when Mario does the jumping. There's a physical element to it, the physics of jumping. So the parabolic trajectory that's occurring. And you notice that Mario is actually jumping significantly higher than a normal person can jump, and is also falling significantly faster. So there's some tweaking that happens that's non-real world physics based. And then finally, there's a sound component, and the sound is limited by the hardware. So how did the sound designer choose the sound that they used so that when the player presses the button, it's a really rewarding sound? So as you can see, there's this interdisciplinary communication that goes on in order to determine why something works to begin with. And then if somebody needs to work to recreate it or create something similar to it, they'll also need to have that communication with developers and artists and musicians. The next thing I think that can really help teachers contextualize video game, or that can help contextualize computer science education, is art pipeline. So a lot of students really love to make art. A lot of students really love to make music, but getting that into a computer can be a very hard problem. But if you latch on to that passion that they have for music and for art, you can start tricking them into learning a few computer science techniques along the way. So one way to do this would be to have the artist work directly on the data on the computer. So in this case, we see a 3D authoring application called Blender. In this case, the artist would have to know enough about the data structures that underlie their work, polygons and vertices and edges, in order to actually create the data that the developer can ingest. The developer, on the other hand, would have to understand enough of the artist's workflow to be able to import the artist's intent into the game engine that they're using. And there's this, whenever anything goes wrong, they both have to have enough overlap of knowledge in order to actually debug the issues. Another way would be to have the artist work in a physical real world medium, and then have the developer learn how to ingest the 3D media or the real world physical media. In this case, I have an illustration of how photogrammetry works, where you take photographs from multiple angles of a physical object. and you use an application in order to create the 3D geometry from it. In this case, the artist would have to know enough about what's going on in order to problem solve any issues arise. And the developer would have to know enough about the artist's process in order to tell them what modifications they need to make in order to make the capture better. So what we're really looking for is that base technical communication. And we believe that this is one way to not only students who are not who are already really into computer science, but we also believe that it's very necessary for the next generation of not just game developers, but application developers. So if you have any questions, you could contact me at shem@themade.org. There's a link to the podcast. And yeah, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them right now.
I see some comments in the chat. So awesome presentation. Thank you. Much agreed. Yes, a great presentation. And I think it fits very well, especially with those of you who might be using our mobile computer science principles curriculum. We do have a question. So did you try to adapt teaching to remote?
So we did not. One big issue that we had was not a lot of students had internet access at that point. And then a lot of the work that we did was done based off of online platforms like Eventbrite or those locations. And so while we could have reached out in that, our determination was more towards like, how do we expand so that we're hitting more people, like even outside of the museum as well. Is it's really tough to determine, like, can we hit our audience versus like if we spread out enough net, then we'll absolutely get people to tune in. There was also a lot just museum in general. How do we move all of the collection into a space so that it's safe? And so we were also juggling those and tough on everything.
Any other questions for Shem? I have one. So just thinking about, I think it's really great that you're sharing the podcast and that has that reach to be shared and used with teachers and students across the nation now. I'm just wondering if you could share a little bit more detail about the process that went into that, because I feel like we're hearing a lot more in this day and age about podcasts, and they're becoming so popular. So can you share a little bit more about what went into the creation of the podcast and how that works?
Yeah, so previously we had a bunch of volunteers who worked with us. They had worked with some sound designers who had come in divisions at the Made, just through studying sound design in college. So we up those volunteers and we're like, hey, like we would like to do this podcast. And Alex Handy, the former executive director of the Made, is very well connected to a lot of these really the OGs of game development and hardware development. And so just like going through the list of these people where we have a very kind of, I think that we sometimes forget the limited amount of time to talk to a lot of these people who set these foundations in digital entertainment. And so that's just what we started doing, was we just started going through all of these connections we had and tried to and ask them, hey, like, would you like to be on our podcast? And it's kind of how it went. Yeah, but it's very volunteer run. And so it's, I'm very privileged to work with such amazing people.
Awesome. And I know you and I the other day were talking, and I was just reminded of the process that you were sharing and how, um, just the idea that even to think about game development or computer science in general, we don't need to think that everyone needs to be the programmer, right? There are other aspects that go into it, right? The artist design and the graphic design is also a huge part of it. And the development, thinking about the development stages, but also the data structures and the data that goes into it and trying to analyze and work with that data. So we kind of get to see just how these different roles come into play, right? And being able to say to a student that you might not be a programmer, you might that might not be what you want to aspire to be, but there are other things that can be done and still be a part of this. So I think that was a good connection there, and thinking about that when you are working with students and trying to engage them, right? How you approach it, I know can be important to help them see that it's everywhere, and no matter what we want to be or what we want to do, computer science is around us. And I think this is a very good example of that. Let's see.
Great. Yeah. Well, thanks for the opportunity to talk about it.
Yeah, we're so happy to have you. And again, if you wanted to share your information, your contact information in the chat, I think people would be willing to reach out. I did put the link to the podcast there. So again, feel free to share that with students, use that with students in the classroom so that way they can hear a little bit with those interviews that are on there. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining us, Shem, and please keep in touch. Awesome. All right. So we are soon to be joined by Sisters Rise Up. My hope is that Barb Erickson will be joining us very, very soon. And I realize she looks like wasn't able to register. Give me 1 second. We'll get her in here. Awesome. All right. So hopefully Barb will be coming in very, very soon. Sorry about that. I just had registration delay that happened. I'm going to remove the spotlight here. We are going to share.
Hey, I'm here now, Pauline.
Hi, Barb. There you are.
Sorry about that.
No worries. We're gonna go ahead and spotlight you. Thank you all for your patience as we get Barb in here. Super excited to have Barb talk about Sisters Rise Up. So we didn't get a chance to see who was teaching which course, but if you're teaching CSA, let us know in the chat because this is going to be for you, right? If you
Or CSP.
or CSP. So looking at helping support females and helping them make sure they pass, right, those AP exams once they're in the course. So I'm going to hand it over to Barb. Barb, I'm more than happy to advance the slides for you if you would like, or I can give remote control to you.
Sure, and I see Brenda's posted in the chat. Thank you, Brenda, that you love CS Awesome. And the CS mobile team has done a great job modifying that and adding more content. So that's been terrific to work with them. Yeah, go ahead and advance. So this is me. I'm Barb Erickson. I'm an assistant professor at University of Michigan. And Sisters Rise Up is a program that I'm running currently with we're reaching anyone taking AP Computer Science, any woman of color taking AP Computer Science, either CS Principles or CSA. And what it is remote help sessions run by undergraduate students from the University of Michigan. We do several weekly 1-hour help sessions, and then monthly we try to do a longer help session. So we're planning one for November where we're going to have them do Flappy Bird and Greenfoot. Greenfoot's a 2D environment that's free that you can use to create 2D games or simulations. And of course, I've been working on free ebooks on Runestone platform. So for CSA, there's CS Awesome. And then for CSP, there's both students CSP, and the PY for E-Int is a new one I've been working on for my course that I teach too. And that actually, I'm also creating online courses for that along with that material. And there's a link right here to that online course, which is free, should always be free for people to take it. If you want to keep accessing it after you finish the course, then you have to pay a fee. But if you just want to take it, and then you can go ahead and do it for free. And if students are interested in joining Sisters Rise Up, they can fill out this form. What we have to do, because it is a research project, is get their parent or guardian info first, have the parents give consent, then we ask the students to provide assent, and then we can enroll them. And then if you're interested in the AP Computer Science data, this is a blog that I do every year. I usually process the data once a year, and then I make graphs and things to talk about what's going on. So if you haven't seen that, that's something you might find interesting. Go ahead and advance. It's a little bit of the current goals, right? What we're trying to do. So there's 2 projects that I run. So Sisters Rise Up is focusing on women of color. And then I also run Rise Up in Michigan, which is for all students that are underrepresented in computing. And what we're trying to do is improve their self-efficacy. They're feeling like they can succeed in computing. We're trying to increase their interest in computing. We're exposing them to near-peer role models that are undergrad people at the University of Michigan right now. And we're trying to help them join a community of practice. So I'm just reading. Go ahead and advance the chat. So people are asking to share it. Okay, great. So I used to be a research scientist at Georgia Tech for many years. And one of my jobs was just really try to grow advanced placement computer science. And I did a lot of teacher professional development. We ran a lot of summer camps trying to figure out what got kids interested in computing. I helped revise the courses in Georgia. But one of the things that I did every year was also look at this AP computer science data. And when I did that, I went, oh no, in Georgia, we had a pretty good number of Black students taking AP Computer Science A in particular, but the pass rate was as bad as 3% one year, when the average pass rate was 40 to 60% usually, so 3%. So originally I started this Project Rise Up for Black students in spring of 2013. And then because women typically pass the exam at a lower rate than men, I also started Sisters Rise Up at Georgia Tech in the fall of 2014. And we did both remote and then, both weekly 1-hour help sessions, as well as longer monthly 3-hour, had the undergraduate near-peer role models. And that's really when I really started working on the book that became CS Awesome, was for Rise Up. And there's some papers there that I wrote about it. You go on to the next slide. And this is me with some of the original crew. The long-term results in Georgia, what I've been excited about is over the years that we've gone from 2012, like 22 African-American or Black students passing the exam with a pass rate of 16%. And as you can see, the pass rate went up over time. And the number of students passing the exam went up quite a bit, from 22 back in 2012 to 69, 85 in 2019 was a high. And then in 2020, it dropped to 69. Can't claim that was all due to Project Rise Up. They did run it after I left. So I left in 2018. I'm not sure if they ran it in 2020, but they did run it at least for another year after I left. And we had a bunch of students who said they wouldn't have passed the exam without the help or would have had a lower score. Go ahead and go to the next slide. For females too, the number of females passing the exam increased, doubled from 2014 to 2016. So again, some of the females said they wouldn't have passed the exam without the help or scored as well as they did. Even females who didn't pass the exam were still interested in continuing and computing. A lot of the women that were in Sisters Rise Up in particular were taking AP Computer Science A virtually. And they said, oh, I would have totally dropped out of computer science because I couldn't get help, I had a virtual teacher, but she wasn't able to give me help when I needed it, but I could message the people and the mentors in Sisters Rise Up and they would respond much quicker. And then just having the role models and seeing other people like them. Go ahead and go to the next slide. And then one of the exciting thing was, we ran it for many years in Georgia, is that we did an alumni survey. And of the people who responded, 79% had taken computing courses in college, 63% were majoring in computing of the people that were in college, because some people were still in high school. And then 24% said that being in Rise Up or Sisters Rise Up changed their major to computing. So people plan to go into other fields, but after being in Rise Up, they were going into computing. I had one woman, one mother call me because her daughter would have been third generation in computing. Her grandmother was in IT, she was in IT, and she wanted to get her daughter in IT, and her daughter wanted to be a vet and had already volunteered like 400 hours at the Zoo Atlanta. But after being in Sisters Rise Up, she said she was going to go in computing. Her mom was so excited that she'd be third generation. Go to the next slide. And then one of my students who's at the upper left here of President Obama that was in Project Rise Up's, I happened to see him when I watched the video of President Obama there. And I was like, oh my gosh, you were right behind him, to the left behind him. Wasn't that cool? And I was just asking, so what did Project Rise Up mean to you? And he said, I had no interest in CS, but when I took this and learn these basic concepts, it would help me succeed and help me succeed when I got to Georgia Tech too. So, and I heard that from several people that, I really wasn't thinking of computer science, or I wasn't thinking of a career in computer science, but being in Rise Up or Sisters Rise Up and meeting people, near peer role models, people like myself that were in computing that had gone and done internships at places like Google or Facebook, that got them to say, yeah, I do want to do this as a career. Does anybody have any questions about this? I see in the chat window.
Hi, I just have a question, and maybe it is not, I don't know, but when I introduced my classes with your program, I got questions. What about us, like the other girls or the boys? And they were a little bit upset that you don't have program for them.
Right, you can't. I can't run programs for everybody. I have a book for everybody.
That's exactly what I said. I said Barbara created it. Whatever she wants, that's what she does.
You may have noticed one of the new things we added to CS Awesome. One of the things I did want to call out was that we have profiles now at the end of the CS Awesome ebook from some of the people that were in Sisters Rise Up to try to introduce more people to diverse role models. So if you haven't noticed that, scroll all the way. I know it's a long way, but scroll all the way to the end of the CS Awesome ebook and you'll see stories. That's something new we added this summer.
Okay.
Yeah. So, right, I figure I made an entire book for everybody. But yes, research projects have limited scope. And so this is a research project which is aiming at women of color or people that are underrepresented, which is all women actually, as well as men that or non-binary that identify as Black, Hispanic, Native American. And if you look at my blog, you'll see why, in part because the numbers are so lopsided. We don't have very many Black women taking AP Computer Science. There's more taking CS Principles than taking CSA, but still it's nowhere near where we should be. Oh, Brenda says, I teach at all girls schools, so I forget about the underrepresented part of their journey. Yeah, for some of the women, it's quite a shock when they, if they do Rise Up or Sisters Rise Up, and then they get to college and then they realize what underrepresented really means. When they're one of 100 or one of, it may be bad enough in high school where often the woman is one of 30 or two of 30, but when they get into college and they're one of 100 or one of a couple hundred, well, I plug aspirations, you bet. So right now is the NC WIT Aspiration Awards. Laura, you want to put that in the chat, the link to it? So if you are a teacher of AP Computer Science, either CS Principles or CSA, remember that you can encourage your girls to apply for the Aspiration Awards. There's both state awards as well as the national awards. And this is a great way to get students recognized for their aspirations in computing and to give them hope to keep going. And the deadline's November 5th, so it's coming up pretty quickly. And there's 3 levels of awards. There's the high school awards, there's the teacher awards. So if you're also a teacher who's been encouraging women in computing, then you can apply for a teacher award. And then there's the collegiate awards. Is that what you mean, Laura?
The other thing I was trying to get at though, Barbara, is that even just at the high school level, there are 3 different, so there's a rising star, honorable mention, and winners, right? So the idea is to get them just as they're beginning their CS journey as rising stars, so they can get connected with other girls like them and be encouraged to persist. Where, so a lot of people kind of think of it, well, I shouldn't recommend a student until they're already a star programmer. That's the wrong attitude. We want to get them earlier than that, right? To get them excited and stick with it. That's all.
Yeah, definitely. And Laura's been running the Aspiration Awards in Michigan for several years now. So we thank you to everybody who runs those award programs. Those are very useful. Does anybody have any other questions for me real quick, or are we almost out of time probably?
Hey, Barb, this is Brenda. Are you going to post like how to get involved or where do we go to get our girls going in this?
Oh, I had a link earlier in the slide.
Okay, that's fine. I got that. All right.
Yeah, there's a link to where they can express interest. Yeah, this can fill out the form at, yeah.
Yeah, this is good because I am in an all-girls school and I had one girl visit, I think Notre Dame last week, and she said they're like 30% and they were really proud of that. And I said, yes, that's fabulous. They had no idea.
The funny thing is, when I was an undergrad, we were 40% female, and that was the really the height of being when computer science was the most female was in the mid 80s.
Yeah, I was there too.
Yeah, one of my first times, we had 8 programmers. We had a token male. So it's quite different these days than it was then. 40% feels a lot different than it had gotten down to like the teens for a while. It's gotten up a little bit again. It's more like in the 20s again, but still that's sad compared to what it used to be, 40%. I'd like to see more women in the field for sure, and more people of color. And that's in part why I create ebooks and try different things on them. Has if I can ask real quick, has anybody tried the, one of the new things we added to the CS Awesome ebook and some of our other ebooks is this toggle feature where you could switch between, so if you're given a right code problem, you could bring up a Parsons problem as a hint, or if you're given a mixed up code problem, you could switch to the right code problem.
Yes, we did that today. It was
Yeah.
great.
That's
Yeah,
one of our new features. I'm excited about that.
yeah. Thanks so much to you and Brad Miller. I mean, y'all are amazing and you're carrying us through this, so appreciate it.
Yeah, we got some new things coming up. We're doing support for peer instruction, and what else are we doing? Well, the toggle feature. We're trying to generate Parsons problems on the fly from student written code, so that'll be interesting. We're trying to use a personalized Parsons problem or mixed up code problem. So if somebody's struggling to write code, can we find the closest correct solution to their incorrect solution and serve that as a personalized mixed up code problem?
Oh, wow.
So that would be cool. So that's one of the things I'm trying to do.
That's great. It's come a long way in the past 3 years, just
Yeah.
that.
Well, Pauline, are we at time, or what are we at? 7:41?
Yeah, I think we're doing good. We have a couple extra minutes if folks still have questions. We have some
I
flexibility.
don't know if anybody's checked out the CS Principles book, or the new Python for Everyone book. That's the PY for E-int. I think I've got some interesting things going on there.
Is that a Runestone book as well?
Yep.
Okay.
We're up to about 30 free ebooks on Runestone now. We're it's quite a bit of growth the last few years.
Yeah, my post AP girls are using Brad's Fundamentals of Python, and it's amazing. It's so thoughtful and well done.
That's good, because that's
Mhm.
part of what he worked for Google for a little while on that.
You can tell, but I think it's too much for APA or even first year, but for second year, it's perfect.
Oh, that's good. He'll
Mhm.
want to hear that.
Yeah.
He gets after me sometimes because he wants me to add some more the new interactive practice things to that book now. So that's on my list.
Okay. Okay. Well, let me know, because I am in deep in that one as well.
Yeah, so we probably would do like we've done to the other books, is at the end of chapter, we'd add, multiple choice questions, mixed up code problems, and the right code problems. Is typically what I do.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
we're pairing that with Edfinity, and it's working out really well, although we have to pay for it, but that's okay.
Yeah, and I know that people who do Edfinity, I think it's Edfinity, Project STEM now, they were interested in the Runestone ebooks too. So I have to check that back in with them to see what's going on with them. Anything else I should share with you? What else? Anything else?
So how are things at University of Michigan from Georgia Tech?
Well, yeah, this is my beginning of my 4th year.
Mhm.
So things are moving along. I have 4 PhD students. One of them is doing horizontal Parsons problems. That's interesting. We're hoping to add that to Runestone next semester, so that if, the regular mixed up code problems are sort of vertical code blocks, and they're
Mhm.
sort of, macro level, you don't have to worry about the whole statement. You just grab the statement and move it over. We're also thinking about a horizontal Parsons problem where you're making the one statement with blocks. So, and yeah, I think that'll be interesting. And then we're trying to also create some automatic help for people that are helping people that have incorrect code. So instead of there's some work in program synthesis that if you have an incorrect solution, you can generate what are all the steps that you need to correct the code to get to a correct solution. But some of the steps don't really always make sense. So if you just serve somebody those steps, well, that's just telling them exactly what to do, but it's not the way a human would do it. So instead, we're planning to serve it to a tutor or somebody who's helping the person with their codes incorrect. And then they can sort of filter that stuff and say, ignore that. And then we also want to leverage the ebooks to suggest, here's some practice problems you can do, because what we see from your incorrect code is that you're having this misconception. So here's
Oh,
a set
wow.
of personalized practice problems for you to try to overcome that misconception or to clear up that concept. So that's another thing we're thinking about. We're trying to
Mhm.
work on. Had a big game this weekend. Yeah, Laura.
So does the Sisters Rise Up, it's like a mentoring program? So if my students are having problems, or is it, did you say it's just a AP study program?
No, it's a mentoring / tutoring program. So,
Okay.
what we do have these once a month larger sessions where we often try to have a guest speaker. We try to do something that's more project based. And then we have the 1 hour sessions that are intended to sort of help them with any issues they have, questions, understand concepts a little bit deeper, perhaps. So we
Barbara,
do.
is it kind of, do you pair the students with specific tutors that they see all the time, or is it just whoever happens to be there when you log in?
Yeah, we tend to, the undergrads tend to keep the same schedule. So they'll know that, Monday is these people, Tuesday is these people, Thursday is these people, whatever. And so if they want to go to the same people, they can,
Right.
but they can also choose to go whichever ones they want to go to.
Okay. So as for the students, we just need to send them to that website and have them register and get involved.
Yeah, well, like I said, because it is
Okay.
a research project, they first have to fill out their parent or guardian information. Then we contact
Okay.
the parent or guardian to sign them up, and they have to provide consent for research. And then we gather the student information, and then the student provides consent.
Okay.
This is just the process for research.
The reason I
Okay.
asked comment about, the only reason I know about the game this weekend is because that we're having trouble with having enough mentors for our Saturday morning club because of this stupid game.
Yeah, that's why we try to run things on Sundays, on weekends, Sunday afternoons, like 1 to 4, somewhere in there. We found to sort of be the sweet spot when I was at Georgia Tech, because a lot of people have things on Saturdays.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Barb, so much for sharing. We do have a couple of more resources to share with those who are here. And I think our next speaker is here. We're going to have a conversation with her. So thank you again to Barb. I'm sure Barb would be happy to put her contact information into the chat and be able to help answer questions about Sisters Rise Up. So we wanted to just quickly share first a resource from the center. So we have what is called the inclusivecsteaching.org website, and I can put that in the chat. If you have not seen that yet, we recommend taking a look. Feel free to take a look. There's lots of resources on there, some strategies, videos, information for you to share with your students. And it's all free in there, and it was developed with CS Awesome and Mobile CSP educators and students in mind. It can be used for any of your CS courses, so you're more than welcome to take a look at that. And then sort of on this other side of things, thinking about mentoring and volunteers and thinking about being able to bring someone actually into your classroom and help with your students. We wanted to share a little bit about the Microsoft Teals program, and I'm super excited to be joined by Sarah Abrams. I'm going to spotlight Sarah, and Sarah teaches in Boston, Massachusetts, correct? So would you like to introduce yourself and maybe share a little bit about Microsoft Teals?
So my name is Sarah Abrams. I am trained as a math teacher, but have been teaching computer science. This is my 3rd year. And I was a comp sci minor using Java back in 1996 to 2000. So that was quite a length of time that I hadn't been using it. I was a little bit nervous about what was going on, and mostly concerned about projects and figuring out how to write projects and do that kind of thing. And also, of course, some content stuff. So actually, one of the other teachers at my school introduced me to Teals, which is a Microsoft program, as Pauline said, and they look for volunteers in the area or they look for professionals in the area who are willing to volunteer their time. And they can, so this year, for example, I have 4 volunteers, 3 people, 1 who works for Microsoft, 2 who work for other companies who I don't remember, and a graduate student from Northeastern. So I teach CS 4 days a week. So every day I have 2 volunteers come in, which is really awesome. Today, one of them did the lecture. They definitely help out when we are doing lab time, and they have been invaluable when putting together projects and yeah, projects a lot. Like they saved me many times last year and the year before because I had no clue what I was doing. I think the TEALS model is the teachers know how to teach, and if you don't know the content as well as you could, then the volunteers are there to support that. So that's a really, it's helpful because we can both teach each other. And they're really flexible too. Is there anything else you wanted me to say, Pauline?
I think you shared just that they end up pairing you. They help to pair you, right, with
Yeah.
volunteers that are in your area. Do you get any say in who in particular? Maybe if your students are interested in maybe a particular field or background, do they help you with that at all? Is it just completely random?
No, it's pretty much just who's ever available, who lives kind of close by. This is my 2nd year working with one guy. So if the relationship is good, it can continue. But besides that, I think it's pretty much based on availability.
Nice.
So.
And how do the students respond? You know, when you introduce them, what is that like?
Well, I think it's great. Last year, of course, was weird because we were all remote. And the Kids Gate told me at the end of the year that they liked it better when the volunteers taught than when I taught. That's fine. No, I think it's really good because we can also, like today, one of the volunteers was presenting, but I was able to hop in and give some ideas about where I've seen students struggle, where maybe a volunteer who's out in the real world wouldn't assume that there would be a struggle there. So, yeah.
Nice. Awesome.
And it's no cost. Supposedly at some point you had to pay a stipend, but this is our 3rd year doing it, my 3rd year involved, and they've never tried to get me to pay any money. So
Nice.
I highly recommend it.
Yeah. Is anyone else that's with us tonight using TEALS, or have you used TEALS previously?
The one other thing to say is that they have 2 separate models. They have a co-teaching model and a support model. So if you feel good about the teaching, but you want support with the labs, they can work it out like that. So you don't necessarily need to have a co-teacher or co-teachers.
Awesome. Any questions for Sarah about TEALS? Feel free to put them in the chat or unmute. Appropriate wait time. Awesome. Well, thank you, Sarah. I appreciate you taking the time out to share a little bit about having the TEALS volunteers come into your classroom. It sounds like it's been very beneficial both for you and for the students. And so if you are interested in that, please do check out their website and become a TEALS school.
I'm also going to put my email in the chat. If anybody wants to contact me, feel free.
Awesome. Thanks, Sarah. All right, so a huge thank you to everyone who joined us and spoke with us tonight. We are super thankful to have had all of our presenters here and to have had our guests as well. We do have a little bit of time left just for any questions that you might have. Just an open Q&A and discussion, but we also have a quick exit survey if you'd be willing to fill out that exit survey and let us know. That helps us get feedback on the webinars and also helps us plan with future webinars if there's a topic that you would like to hear about in the future. Our next webinar will be next month. I believe it is November 30th, if I remember correctly. That information will go out in our newsletters for CSP and CSA. And you are more than welcome to join us. Again, this recording will be available on our YouTube channel. We'll also send it out. So you can go back and you can share the video of the virtual tour with your students. And you also have the slides that you can use to help get quick access to all of the great resources that were shared. And thank you to everyone for joining. And if you have questions, we'd be happy to answer them. Stick around for a few minutes. Otherwise, thank you.
I've got a real quick one. The survey link that doesn't list this particular, it has 3 different activities asking what we attended, and it doesn't have the one for today.
Okay, let me see. Let me check it out.
That something from yesterday, interactive workshop, equitable grading, building a CS pathway through student. Is that it? No, today's not. Today's.
Let me. It looks like. So yeah, my apologies. Looks like this one did not get added. I will add it right now for you. So just give me a moment.
Yeah, somebody else noticed too.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah.
If you go ahead and refresh, it should be showing up for now.
I closed out.
Yeah, and I mean, as long as you're, as long as there'll be a timestamp on it. So to be honest, you could select any one of those, and I would know that you were talking about the one that you were here for tonight. So we're just happy to get any feedback that we can. You're also welcome to send us an email at css@css.edu if you have other thoughts and ideas about topics as well. And I made a typo. Figure it out. Right. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stop my screen share and stop the recording.